there was a moment where Europe has another meaning. Exclusion, differences and violence.
Wir haben all diese Errungenschaften, diese Freiheiten, diese Sicherheiten geschenkt bekommen. Ich musste nie dafür eintreten, dass ich in Frieden leben kann. Ich habe das so seit meiner Geburt.
For me, European democracy is both a huge experiment. So for the first time in history, having a democracy of several European nation states coming together.
Brexit was for us at least a sign that it doesn't have to work out. You know, there is the chance that if we don't stand up, that if we don't do something, that it will go wrong.
Wer, wenn nicht wir? Wer, wenn nicht wir, sind diejenigen, die für das europäische Projekt einstehen.
Democracy means a system that is made by people for people.
We're pro-European, but currently the EU is not in a shape to really work well.
Financial crisis, migration, institutional crisis and the reawakening of nationalistic movements. The European Peace Project has reached its most challenging phase since its inception. Never before have decisions that are made at European level been so crucial to our future. Furthermore, never have these decisions been so heavily criticised by member state citizens themselves. What are the specific challenges faced by members of the European Parliament we elect in May 2019? What are the specific problems encountered by the 28, soon to be 27 member states, particularly on a national level? Is the EU important to its citizens, and how can the EU better engage directly with its citizens? We interviewed academics, politicians and researchers, all of whom are committed to furthering the European Union idea. We are a group of students currently pursuing a master's degree in European Studies in Berlin. We conducted interviews with Valerie Sternberg and Damian Boeselager from Volt, Europe's first transnational party.
On the movement side, we are expanding our reach. We're constantly doing events in every city. Every week there's an event in all of our cities. And on the campaign political side, we're getting ready to run a successful campaign and win 25 seats in the European Parliament out of 7 countries. That is the goal.
We also interviewed Nikolai von Ondarza from German Institute for International and Security Affairs, Federico Quadrelli from Partito Democratico and Katja Sinko, initiator of the European Moment movement.
Wir hatten uns den Slogan überlegt, sorry, wir sind spät dran, aber jetzt muss Europa gerettet werden, 2016. Das war schon ein politisch gesehen beschissenes Jahr mit der Wahl von Donald Trump, mit dem Brexit-Referendum und generell dem ganzen Rechtsruck in Europa. Da hatte ich das Gefühl, da will ich jetzt nicht länger nichts zu sagen, ich muss irgendwie aktiv werden.
Why is there a need to act now? What does Brexit mean for the EU? How will migration influence Europe's future? How will climate change impact Europe's future? How can the EU overcome differences in language and culture? What would be the biggest challenges for the EU in the next 5 years?
Die EU ist das Erfolgsprojekt des 20. Jahrhunderts. Wir leben im 21. Jahrhundert. Und ich habe das Gefühl, dass all die neuen Herausforderungen und Probleme, die wir haben, nicht mehr so gerettet werden können in der EU, wie sie gerade besteht. Und deswegen müssen wir dafür Sorge tragen, dass es halt Veränderungen gibt.
We have to address all the people who are living now the situation of confusion or scare about so many events that they cannot control. And migration is one of them.
I think many of the people, and that brings me to the second point, that currently don't care about politics are also a bit annoyed by the fact that all these parties are always stuck a bit in their old answers. Yeah? So, I don't know, the left has to always be against the business, the liberals have to be always against any social kind of activities, and that is not, I think, what we feel our generation, a lot of people also outside our generation feel makes sense. We started just writing down all our questions and trying to find the best answer by looking what's there in the European Union, because you have so many countries, so you have a lot of good answers in each country. So for example, Estonia being really ahead with digitization of the state. So you only have to, I think you only have to go to an administrative office, so actually talk to a person if you get married or if you get divorced. So all the rest you can do online as a citizen. Yeah? So why is that not possible in other countries? I think this approach of looking for the best solution is much more what in our generation makes sense than, or what makes more sense to our generation and also a lot of other people, rather than being stuck left or right.
So what we really need to do is find a way to tackle Euroscepticism, which means that we need to bring people back on the stage. We need European politics to be run and well decided by the people. So they actually need to know what is happening at European stage. They need to vote for European parties which they can actually refer to, which they can understand what they're doing. And so, yeah, I think through that process, only then we can come to a united and common approach to finding answers for all the other challenges ahead.
Es gibt sehr viel an der EU zu kritisieren und wir wollen vor allem gemeinsam auch dazu beitragen, zu überlegen, wie kann denn die EU in der Zukunft besser werden und auch eine Union sein, die nicht nur für gewisse Schichten von Vorteil ist, sondern wo alle auch von diesen verschiedenen Freiheiten, die die EU ja vielen Menschen bietet, wie mir zum Beispiel. Ich habe Erasmus gemacht, ich habe im Ausland gelebt, gearbeitet, aber das ist natürlich nicht Realität für alle Menschen und ich glaube, es ist wichtig und da auch der Solidaritätsgedanke wieder, dass man halt dafür Sorge trägt, dass es Realität für jede und jeden wird.
Brexit was sort of depicted as the climax of trends and movements and events expressing isolationism and nationalism. And I think this is what it superficially was, but I think what it mainly was is a deep frustration and a frustration by people to think that they don't have a say in politics and that they are overruled by some institutions in Brussels where they don't even know, they've never visited this. They partially speak French, so what do English have to do with like a French-speaking community or something opposing political decisions upon them?
So Brexit is, I think for many of our generation, really like a seizure. Before it was somehow clear that the European Union would always further integrate, and I think many people even might complain about it, but they never had the reality in their mind that it might fall apart. And now with Brexit, a lot of these people get new strength in saying, hey, we can actually make this fall apart. And why is that so important or such a bad event is that the disintegration of the European Union will push us back into the past of having single states, fighting for interests among each other. It doesn't always have to be military, but could be. And we believe, and I think many people believe, that this is completely outdated, dangerous, and also will be a huge disadvantage to all countries.
We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past, addressing minorities, in this case refugees, as the enemy. They are not enemy, they are asking for help. We have our responsibility for that, and we have to find together a solution. If the European Union is not able to do that, we cannot alone defend this project.
Migration, as we said earlier, is also a huge example of where single states fail, and even governments break apart about it or over it. The German government had a tough time because Merkel tried to do it on the European level a bit. but then single parties are trying to break it apart.
I think migration is really the one area that's most dangerous to the cohesion of the European Union, where it's still very much up in the air whether the EU will be able to find an answer on how to deal with refugees, how to deal with its neighborhood, and at the same time protecting its values. And I think this is the area where the EU will be most under attack also in the European elections, where populist anti-EU parties will very strongly criticize the EU for its current migration policies and for allowing, in their point of view, too many refugees and migrants into Europe.
I think climate change is a very good example why we need to think in bigger levels, in a broader picture. It doesn't help if, Slovenia alone does the most amazing climate change program trying to, curb CO2 emissions, if the rest of Europe, for example, doesn't do it, and also if the rest of the world doesn't do it.
Global challenges such as migration and climate change do not only endanger or already impact the Europeans' future, they already impact the Europeans' presence, and we can see that by these challenges actually creating a lot of tension between states, because what happens is that countries want to find their own solutions towards those problems, and they have different attitudes towards tackling those problems, and they probably put their short-term interests first in tackling those problems.
Das sind Dinge, die kann kein Nationalstaat heutzutage mehr alleine lösen. Und ich glaube, es ist umso wichtiger, da gemeinsame Lösungen zu finden und auch gemeinsam viel stärker zusammenzuarbeiten und nicht zu schauen, was ist denn für mein nationales Interesse am besten, sondern was ist denn für das europäische Gemeinwohl für alle am besten. Und da, glaube ich, gibt es zahlreiche Herausforderungen, wo wir jetzt auch als Bürgerinnen und Bürger uns klar dafür einsetzen müssen, dass auch entsprechend das von unseren Regierungen so umgesetzt wird.
I think there's a strong and joint position within Europe that Europe has to play a leading role to fight climate change and try to bridge the differences that there are on the international arena. And here I think the EU will play more of a unified role to support the Paris Climate Change Agreement.
Together in our diversity, uniti nella diversità. It's the major, powerful message that the European Union can send today, because it's still actual.
Das, was Europa ausmacht, ist diese Vielfalt an Kulturen, an Sprachen. Das ist was man, glaube ich, in wenigen Regionen der Welt auf so engen Raum sehen kann und erleben kann. Das zeichnet Europa aus, nicht umsonst das Motto der EU in Vielfalt geeint. Und ich finde, dass es sehr, sehr wichtig ist, dass man dafür Sorge trägt, dass das auch so bleibt.
I think the difficulties of languages is something that will always be there for the European public sphere. We have these many different languages and they're part of the European culture. So I think ideas like getting a unified European language or speaking English is not the right answer, but it needs the EU needs to be able to speak in the languages of the citizens directly to them. So I think the biggest advancement in that area is probably going to be more automatic translation, so that at least some kind of debates can be held online or in other virtual spaces for citizens to interact directly with each other. And then to create media outlets like Politico that are able to address an elite audience across Europe.
We share together something, which are that we want peace, that we decide to create a common market in order to avoid competition, or, well, it was one goal, but if it's really so, I don't know. I'm more skeptical about that. We are still in a competition system, and this is one of the major problems in the European Union right now. I think that the next European Parliament will face one of the most dangerous or difficult situation in the history of the European Union after the Second World War, because we see the rise up of new right movement and xenophobia, and the concrete risk that we fall down. we must protect this project because it means chance, it means possibility, it means peace.
It's important to ask yourself the question, am I doing enough currently to somehow influence this? Because we somehow lay back and we think it's all being done by other people, but that's not true. Like, there are not too many people in politics. If you decide to actually at least support in a local event or like even think about going into politics, you can really change things, and we have to get this understanding back. I think this is really important. It's not anyone, and if something will go wrong over the next 10, 20 years, at least you should be able to tell yourself, I tried to make it better. So get politically engaged. Doesn't have to be bold, but can be bold. But like, get politically engaged and somehow try to fight for the society that you want to live in, because at the moment it's really changing. And at the other side, if you want, like the more right-wing or populist or very conservative forces, they're not stopping. You know, they are active. They're organizing themselves well, and we have to somehow fight for what we want to live in, what kind of society we want to live in.
So far, EU skeptic forces are divided into basically 4 political groups in the European Parliament: the European Conservatives and Reformists, the Europe for Freedom and Direct Democracy, the Europe of Nations and Freedom, and the non-aligned, who are the real right extremist parties. By being so dispersed into 4 different groups, they are very little able to actually influence lawmaking and policy making on the European level. They can make a big splash and get attention, but they can't influence the actual lawmaking. However, if they would both rise in numbers and also unite under a single political group, which is the ambition of some of the leaders like Salvini in Italy, or from the FPÖ in Austria, or famously Steve Bannon from the United States, then they would be a much bigger force also in the European Parliament that could potentially also influence lawmaking and not just grab attention. The biggest challenges for me in the next 5 years are probably internationally, that the European Union is faced with the United States, that it has become much more critical of the transatlantic relationship, a resurgent Russia, and an emerging China. And so the European Union has to find its place internationally. I think the second biggest challenge is the internal cohesion, so to keep the European Union together, and particularly on migration policy, but also the future of the Eurozone. And probably the third biggest challenge is technologically how to deal with the emergence of artificial intelligence, new technologies like self-driving cars, and how to regulate that. And I think the biggest role of the European Parliament will actually be in the third cluster, in the regulation of the single market, where it traditionally has played a major role, for instance, most recently with the general data protection regime. And I think this is the area where the European Parliament as an institution will play the biggest role, but it also will have a strong role to play on the future of the Eurozone and migration, whereas on the international scene, I think it's still up more to national leaders to find an answer to the international challenges.